This 2024 NFL Defensive Player of the Year betting odds and picks edition of the Propcast on the Sports Gambling Podcast Network is brought to you by Underdog Fantasy. Underdog is giving away $15 million in Best Ball Mania 5. Sign up with promo code MACHINE to claim your first-time deposit offer up to $250 in bonus cash. That's UnderdogFantasy.com. Make sure that promo code MACHINE. And we're also brought to you by Rhythm. Rhythm has the best AI picks and projections, and their football models are almost live. Claim your 7-day free trial today by going to sportsgamblingpodcast.com/rhythm. That's sportsgamblingpodcast.com/RITHMM. Welcome, everyone, to the Propcast, part of the Sports Gambling Podcast Network. The last of our awards breakdown here for the upcoming season before we do get into our season-long player props that we'll do division by division previews for. Definitely looking forward to that. But still, one more award market that at least we wanted to get into before we get into the month of August. And I know Thursday, the Hall of Fame game in football is officially back. But joining me here to help me break everything down for Defensive Player of the Year in the NFL, I've got my guy here with me. It's ChrisBeCappinn. Chris, what's going on, my man? How you doing?
What's up? Excited to be back, man. I know we took a little bit of hiatus, but NFL, like you said, Hall of Fame game is right around the corner, and we gotta finish out strong here. We've been through a lot of the different props and different markets. So let's keep finishing. Let's go ahead and finish strong. Here with Defensive Player of the Year, and then won't be long before we're doing shows giving out player props. So super excited on a weekly basis. Super excited about that as well, and super excited to get into some of these interesting defenders that we have.
Yeah, it's now it's go time, right? When the month of August comes, everybody's doing their season previews and team previews, and we'll be doing, like I mentioned, our season-long player props, and like Chris mentioned, before we know it, we'll be giving out our weekly player props for the Sunday games and for the primetime games as well. So definitely looking forward to it. Again, right around the corner, obviously, with the Hall of Fame game on Thursday, with my Texans actually in action taking on the Chicago Bears. So we'll be great to see football back on our screens. And like Chris mentioned, we've gone through most of the other markets in the awards section, whether it's MVP, Coach of the Year, Comeback Player of the Year, Offensive Player of the Year. We just finished up in the last episode, and I know we won't probably get to the Rookie of the Year, Offensive and Defensive Year, but we've covered the rest. So again, plenty of time for you guys to get to the other episodes that we did for the awards markets before the season starts. Then about a little over a month away from the NFL season kicking off. And today, like we mentioned, we'll talk about the Defensive Player of the Year. We'll kind of go through what we've seen as far as handicapping and what kind of constitutes and what maybe is the criteria, I guess I could say, for winning Defensive Player of the Year. And off the top, Chris, I'll start with this. When I went back and looked at it and some of the past award winners, it almost seems like there was most like chalky guys, the guys at the top that were winning this award. And I was trying to find, when guys like my guy, like JJ Watt, what his odds were when he actually did win it. But you take a look at some of the past winners, and it's like last year, Myles Garrett, I'm pretty sure, was one of the chalk guys to win the award. He was on the best player on the best defensive team last year. We'll talk about that here momentarily, but that's kind of what I noticed here, Chris. Anything that stood out to you as far as when you were digging into looking for guys to win NFL Defensive Player of the Year?
No, it was just that. If I know we like to be contrarian and go against the markets and pick and choose our spots, but once you get outside of, honestly, probably 40-1, which is only about 6-7 guys, it kind of feels like you're throwing darts just a tad bit. The thing that stood out to me, was probably looking at the recipients of the award. I want to say, right off the top of my head, I want to say 5 of the last 7 have been defensive ends. So we're not talking about safeties or cornerbacks. Like, you really have to have a tremendous impact and be out there getting a bunch of tackles, flying around, making plays, forcing fumbles, getting fumble recoveries, and racking up the sacks as well. Those are the things that really jumped out to me. You really have to be able to fill it all up. I know it's not, a triple double in the NFL, but it kind of feels like you need to, we have to quantify that in some way or form. But those are the players that are having that tremendous, impact on the defensive side.
Yeah, so you take a look at the last 10 years, and 9 of the 10 have been guys that are either linebackers or defensive ends, right? The only other guy that wanted back in 2019 was Stephon Gilmore when he was with the New England Patriots. But like you mentioned there, Chris, it's mostly defensive guys or linebackers, defensive line guys, or defensive ends. Myles Garrett last year, Nick Bosa, TJ Watt, Aaron Donald, who wanted what in the span of 3 times in about 4 years. Khalil Mack, linebacker, and then JJ Watt, who had also wanted 3 times in the span of 4 years. And you had Luke Kuechly in there as well. You would have to, Chris, go all the way back to 2010, when Troy Polamalu, safety, wanted for the Pittsburgh Steelers. But after that, since 2010, like I mentioned, it's only been one guy, Stephon Gilmore, who's been a secondary guy that has won this award. So that tells you a lot of what you need to know when it comes to this award. That it's mostly guys that are going to get the sack numbers, get the forced fumbles, the tackles for losses, making those type of plays for their respective teams. And I went back and looked at it last year, and Myles Garrett numbers as far as individual stats, Chris, it wasn't like he was a league leader in a lot of those stats, but his team defensively was the best team defensively. When you looked at yards allowed per game, passing yards allowed per game, I think that's another criteria that you probably look at here, that defensively, hey, if the team is number one, whether it's defensive DVOA or just, pure basic stats, that typically that player, the best defensive player on that team, is typically going to win that award. And I think at least last year, that was the case with Myles Garrett. Aaron Donald, I mean, we saw him just put up absolutely crazy numbers with the sacks and just how much of a defensive force he was. But that's something that I did notice here when I was kind of going through the list here. And unfortunately, a lot for the guys that I do like are at the top here that are going to be a little bit chalky. But before we actually get into the odds here for the 2024 NFL Defensive Player of the Year, let me tell everyone about Sports Gambling Podcast, and they have launched officially their 32-team preview for the upcoming NFL season. And as a bonus, each team preview will include a code word. Submit the 32 code word phrase, and you could be the lucky winner who gets a $500 NFL Circa future bet. Subscribe wherever you do get your podcast and the SGPN app. All right, Chris, so let's actually get into the odds here for this Defensive Player of the Year award. We'll start here kind of towards the middle of the pack. I'll cut it off around 60-1 because there are some names in there that could be a little bit intriguing for this award. But when you look at the top of the award and guys that are the cream of the crop and the favorites, you have 5 guys that have odds that are 8-1 or shorter. And we'll get to that list here in a minute. So we'll start around 60-1. Brian Burns at 60-1. Kayvon Thibodeau 60-1. Jalen Ramsey 60-1. Khalil Mack, former winner of the award, 60-1. Sauce Gardner 60-1. Jalen Johnson 60-1. Any of those guys intrigue you there in that kind of range of 60-1 or greater for you when you were kind of breaking this down here, Chris?
Nah, they really didn't. If I did have a little bit of interest in you mentioned Burns.
Yeah.
He not enough, I guess, to actually go out and bet it, but he interests me just from the standpoint of situation change just a tad bit from, of course, right? Linebacker for the Giants, previously played for the Panthers. But I was looking into, I did my homework, most of it yesterday, day before yesterday. When I was looking into it, he actually left yesterday's practice with a foot injury. Now, of course, he's not, projected to be anything too, severe. But, I don't like the guys that get those early knick-knack injuries. We know that the NFL season already is grueling and daunting enough. So if we're in training camp, not even gotten to the preseason game one, you're already getting nicked up, especially with those leg injuries. Anything from waist down is always going to be a concern. And I think for him it was an ankle injury. Of course, we know you need your ankle. Don't have to say that. But Brian, he did stick out to me just a tad bit. He was able to have some success with the Panthers. But you do have him first year in a new defense as well. Like I said, coming over from the Panthers to the Giants. The Giants will definitely need him to make plays. So his name kind of stuck out just a tad bit. I really like what Cal Hamilton did. I don't know if you mentioned Cal or not, but I like what Cal was able to do for the Baltimore Ravens, safety for the Ravens. He's projected to step into a little bit more of a leadership role. This being his third year on the team. I mean, he's a massive safety, 6'4", 220. Definitely a difference maker for one of the best defenses in the league. And we talked about him, if you mentioned it already, but when we're betting in this market, we do want not only individual success, but we want team success as well. We remember how well Baltimore was, just limiting opponents pretty much in every statistical category. They were a great defense on third down, but him being a safety kind of scared me off of him as well, and so yeah, the list that you mentioned so far, none of those guys really stick out to me, jump off the page to me at all. What about you?
Yeah, Brian Burns, I agreed with you, right? Because he was a guy that when he was with the Carolina Panthers before getting traded over to the Giants, I mean, was an absolute menace. You take a look over since his rookie season, 2019, he's recorded at least 8 sacks for the Carolina Panthers. The tackles for loss have been there for him as well. Solo tackles, assist tackles, that the numbers have been there, and he's been healthy, right? You take a look over the last 3 seasons, 17 games in 2021, played 16 games in each of the last 2 seasons as well. And like you mentioned, like the change of scenery is something huge for these guys and these teams, going from where Carolina just was not very good. I mean, since Cam Newton, we can say, and going over to a Giants team that, they made the playoffs in the first year that Brian Daboll took over as a head coach when he won Coach of the Year as well. But it's almost the fact that you also need to think about team defense as well, right? Because a lot of these awards, and I think we could compare this to the NBA, is that the NBA MVP award, I know this is Defensive Player of the Year, but it usually typically goes to the best player on the best team. And I think that for this award, at least, it goes to the best player on the best defensive team. So at least in the range, nothing really made sense to me. I know you have the big sexy names in here, guys like the Sauce Gardners of the world and the Kayvon Thibodeau, his own teammate, right? They're around 66-1, 60-1. Again, definitely, like we always say, shop around for the best number. If you do like Brian Burns, you could get at Bet Rivers right now, 66-1 for him to win the award. Kayvon Thibodeau at BetMGM is at 100-1, where it's right now around 60-1 on DraftKings. So again, that's a huge discrepancy there. So if you like some of these longer shots, again, definitely shop around and get the best number and make it worth it for you. Because again, like we've talked about throughout us previewing these awards, that you're tying your money up for about about 6 months, and you want to have the best odds in your pocket. If your guy has a phenomenal year for you and you're getting down to the wire, that he may be in consideration for this award. So we'll move it along here to the next bracket here. Guys around 50-1. Fred Warner, Rashawn Gary, Hassan Reddick, Trey Hendrickson, Joey Bosa, Jalen Carter. Hassan Reddick, I know, is a guy that can get at the sacks for you. We've seen that throughout his career when he was with the Lions, when he went over to the Eagles. Trey Hendrickson last year as well. I want to say he finished second last year, if I'm not mistaken, in sacks last year. But again, it just goes to the fact that I'm also looking at teams that are going to be really, really good defensively this year. And I'm not sure if the Bengals really fit that mold this year coming up for this award. But nothing really stuck out to me here, Chris. Anybody in this kind of range that stuck out to you?
We're below, what is that, 6,600? So we're looking at Cal. I mentioned Cal Hamilton. You mentioned
you mentioned Cal Hamilton,
Gary, right? You got Josh Allen in there in that kind of poll as well. Not enough. Rashawn Gary is, linebacker out of Green Bay. I do like the experience for him as well. This being, I think, about year 5 or 6 for him. I know he's 26 years old, 6 years of experience. He did sign the contract extension to stay with Green Bay, 4 years, $96 million. And I think, if I'm betting on one of these names and it's not one of those top 3 or 4 or 5 guys, I want one of these guys that are hungry for a contract. That's also something that we can
100%.
take into consideration, right? And when I'm looking at, guys that, recently signed or, maybe 8th, 9th, 10 year, they're on, contract number 3. Those are not the guys, and we're going to talk about a couple more of them as well, that kind of really jump off the page to me. Gary had a really good season last year, 2 forced fumbles, 2 fumble recoveries to go along with 9 sacks, which I loved all of that, but not enough to really move the needle for me out there in Green Bay. Chris Jones is another one. We know how good the Chiefs are. They always have that switch that they can flip throughout any part of the season, defensive tackle for the Chiefs, of course. But I don't want to bet on any of these guys that's in year, 9, 10, 11, any of those guys either. They just, this is personal preference. And Chris Jones entering season number 10. He just signed that massive contract to stay with the Kansas City Chiefs. They locked him up for another 5 years, gave him almost $160 million. And it's hard for me to want to bet on a guy with a big contract like that. He also just strained his groin already, before the season even started. Hopefully that doesn't linger, but we know what not groin, hamstring. We know hamstrings can be very lingering injuries. So I stayed away from Gary. I stayed away from Jones. How far did we just go? I don't want to go too far.
Yeah. So mentioned Kyle Hamilton 35-1. Chris Jones, you mentioned at 30-1. And before we do kind of get to the cream of the crop there, but again, it's the fact that a lot of these guys that we think that can put up the numbers, but also you want to look at the fact that can they be stat leaders, right? The guy that's going to have the most sacks for you, because if you like some of these guys to rack up the sacks and maybe not necessarily win the Defensive Player of the Year award because your team may not be very good, I think that's another market you possibly want to explore. Because just for example, Trey Hendrickson of the Cincinnati Bengals last year finished second in total sacks behind, I think it was Myles Garrett that led the league last year. TJ Watt led the league last year with 19 sacks, but behind him was Trey Hendrickson at 17.5, also Josh Allen. And both those guys, at least for the Defensive Player of the Year award right now, are sitting at odds of, let's see here, 25-1 for Josh Allen, and then Trey Hendrickson's at 50-1. Well, maybe if you don't think they're going to win those awards, you're not getting those big sexy odds here. But if you want to look at them for sack leaders, Trey Hendrickson 10-1 to be the sack leader, and then who did I just mention as well? Trey Hendrickson and let's see, Brian Burns at 50-1. So if you like some of these, Chris Jones 20-1 to win, so lead the league in sacks. So I think that's something that may be a little bit correlated, that if you want to look at it that way, for some of these guys. So yeah, we'll cut it here at 30-1 here, which is at Chris Jones here, Chris.
Yeah, like we talked about,
was another name that I thought was interesting. I know you probably have a lot more on him as well, but
yeah, I mean, so with Montez Sweat, you get, what is it, second year, of course, now coming over from my Commanders,
right.
In Chicago, which I'm pretty sure they'll need him. New coaching scheme out there as well. I don't know about defensively, but I think some new faces, some new names, and definitely a guy that has a lot to prove. Still very young as well. If we talked about hitting on those guys that are, pretty young at age and still feeling like they have a lot to prove, I couldn't talk anybody off, potentially putting a little sprinkle. You can get them plus 60-1. I think is the best odds that I see for Montez Sweat. Probably a lot happier in the new system as well. We know, Washington was a really good defense when they did have him, and they had Chase Young as well. But definitely some regression in that department, and he's going to be out there. I do expect him to be out there, guy. Pretty, free of injury throughout his career as well. So couldn't talk anybody off looking at maybe Montez Sweat. I wouldn't go too heavy, but Montez Sweat, just a long shot there.
All right. Before we get over to some of the top names to win this award for the upcoming season, let me tell everyone about our friends over at Underdog Fantasy. Underdog Fantasy just launched Underdog Streaks. Hit your first 2 pick'em entries and then go streaking. If you can get a 11-0 run, you can win 1000x your entry and money. Plus, Best Ball Mania is live with 15 million in prizes. And you can now use specials and boosts on all flex entries. So sign up with promo code MACHINE to claim your special pick and first-time deposit offer up to 250 in bonus cash. Again, that's underdogfantasy.com. Make sure that promo code MACHINE. And we're also brought to you by OddsJam. OddsJam is your one-stop shop for beating the sports books. OddsJam uses millions of data points across every U.S. and Canadian sportsbook to show you the best value for your money. Their line shopping tool shows you the best price for any bet you want to make across countless sportsbooks, not just DraftKings and FanDuel, but even BetOnline, Bovada, Cut, and many more. Their arbitrage tool will find opportunities where you can bet both sides of the same prop on different sportsbook to guarantee a positive ROI. Their new fantasy tool features the highest EV plays relative to the sportsbook odds, allowing you to crush sites like Underdog Fantasy. And they even have a tool for finding the best sign-up bonuses. If you're interested in trying out OddsJam, you can get a 7-day free trial by using my link below. And don't forget to enter promo code SGPN to get 35% off your first month of your subscription. Again, oddsjam.com. Make sure that promo code SGPN. All right, Chris. So let's get over to the next kind of bracket here of guys before we get to the cream of the crop. And it's pretty much 2 guys that I crossed off of my list immediately. And it's my guys, Will Anderson Jr. at 20-1 and Danielle Hunter at 25-1. Why? Because again, number one, teammates. This defense is going to be great, right? They made the additions. You have a defensive-minded head coach in D'Amico Ryans. But anytime I see 2 teammates that have these close odds next to each other, and they're more than likely going to take votes away from each other, unless obviously with injuries and things like that, things can change. But they're both having a great season. That just kind of takes a votes away from each other. Josh Allen, I think, is another intriguing name of the Jacksonville Jaguars at 25-1. Last year, he had a phenomenal year for the Jacksonville Jaguars. He finished tied for second in sacks last year, had 66 total tackles last year for his team. So I think that was one name that did intrigue me here for Josh Allen. Again, that's a team that really needs to, I don't want to say it's a make or break year for them, but that team has, I think, been really, really underwhelming over the past several seasons, especially under Trevor Lawrence. So we'll see if they're able to make that next leap there. And yeah, those are 3 guys before we dig to get to the top 6 names here, Chris. But anything for Will Anderson, Danielle Hunter, or Josh Allen here?
So not as much, like you said, we always think the same on these players, on these teammates, especially when the odds are so closely, listed for each other. So Will Anderson Jr. and Danielle Hunter, like you said, being on the same team, also playing the same position. They both play on the defensive line. We do have to almost kind of pause for a second, just give Alabama their credit, man. Their defensive linemen that come out of the draft with, Will Anderson Jr. Boy. This is different down there. And he's only going into his second season, seven sacks last year. In his first season, we expect him to be a little bit better, down in Houston this year. So not enough to push me over the edge, but I like Will Anderson Jr. and what he's doing for you guys. Danielle Hunter coming over from Minnesota. So it'll be a little bit of a new look for him, and you have I wouldn't say super inexperienced, but inexperienced versus experienced, because Danielle Hunter's been in the league for quite some time now. He's one of those guys that'll be in his 10th year, so that also crossed him off the list for me as well. Not that he won't have a tremendous impact, but just that I would much rather bet on one of these younger guys, especially with the odds for Danielle Hunter, not being that intriguing in my opinion. And then Josh Allen, linebacker for Jacksonville, Josh Allen. My thoughts are similar to yours. I've had a really great season last year, 17.5 sacks, which is, absolutely out of this world. I know a lot of the times I was watching Red Zone last year, and they would mention Josh Allen, and you would have to do a double take to figure out which one they were talking about if you weren't staring at the screen, because his name was being called as much as any other defender, and almost as much as the offensive Josh Allen that plays for the Buffalo Bills. So I couldn't talk anyone off of potentially looking at Josh Allen. But like you mentioned, it does kind of feel up like a make or break type season, because Jacksonville, they had those expectations placed upon them, and they haven't necessarily lived up to being the cream of the crop. But Josh Allen will be one of those players that I think will be in the mix for this award. Also a guy that quote unquote still kind of like in his prime at 27 years old. So couldn't talk anybody off when to sprinkle on Josh Allen. I think best odds right now are about 25-1. So those are those two guys.
Yeah, and look, I'm excited about this Texans defense. I mean, it's a breath of fresh air. I think your Commanders as well, right? Like with the new quarterback and the new, coaching regime there, like it's up and coming for both of our organizations. So I know we'll talk a lot about it during the regular season as well. So I mean, look, they gave up a lot last year to the Texans to get Will Anderson, but I think obviously with him winning defensive player of the year, a rookie defensive player of the year last year, and having obviously CJ Stroud, and now you have Danielle Hunter next to him as well. I think there's going to be a lot of excitement here for this defense for the upcoming season. So, Chris, that gets us to the top 6 guys here. I think this is where probably our more expanded conversation is going to be, because, again, like we mentioned at the top of the show, it's been guys that have been chalky. And we'll start here with Aiden Hutchinson, former number 1 overall pick, over to the Detroit Lions, 10-1 right now for him to win the award. And then we'll go to Myles Garrett, who did win it last year, 8-1. And then Max Crosby, 7-1 for the Las Vegas Raiders. Those are the number 3, number 4, number 5. Number 4, 5, and 6 guys. And just to give you the best odds that you can find with those guys, Myles Garrett, 8-1 is the best right now, currently over on DraftKings. He's at 8-1. And then we go over to Max Crosby. His best odds are at 10-1 at FanDuel. Again, that's a big discrepancy. And then also, like I mentioned, with Aiden Hutchinson, 16-1 over on FanDuel. So again, like we've been preaching, shop around for the best number. I mean, that's just a huge discrepancy between 10-1 and 16-1 for Aiden Hutchinson. So, Chris, of these 3 guys, anybody intrigue you here?
Man, honestly, we had the time now, but kind of all of them kind of started to become a little bit intriguing, right? You mentioned Aiden Hutchinson, and it's just the prestige. Him being the 2nd overall pick, a young guy. The other thing I really like about Aiden Hutchinson, he's still on that rookie deal. I just talked about it. Kind of figuring out the motivation for these players, and how much money does Aiden Hutchinson want to accumulate over the course of his career, because we're talking about a guy that could potentially be one of the highest paid defensive linemen going into one of the biggest contracts that we've seen for what he can bring to the table. And again, another box that Aiden Hutchinson checks, he's going to be on a defense, it's going to be good, right? Like the Detroit Lions are a good defense. I remember doing the first show with you and Rod last year, when they were in Kansas City, and how good their defense looked against them. So, as long as he can stay healthy, and so far, knock on wood, he has been able to, playing 17 games in both seasons so far. I just love what Aiden Hutchinson brings to the table. If his numbers, his totals for his tackles were about the same last year, but he had 2 more sacks. He forced 3 fumbles last year, recovered 2 fumbles last year as well, and had an interception. So I couldn't talk you off of looking at Aiden Hutchinson, just because I think the Lions are going to be good. And I think that this defense is also going to be good. So I can imagine some storylines that come along with not just the offensive ability for this team to be able to score the football, but also, some defensive, talk to kind of come from that as well. So Aiden Hutchinson at 16-1. I think I could not talk you off of that one, off of him at all, And then I think you also threw in Max Crosby and who was it? Nick Bosa?
Max Crosby, Myles Garrett.
And Myles Garrett. So Crosby is an interesting guy to me as well. You know, I was just recently watching the quarterback again, and watching him and Mahomes go back and forth at it is always pretty funny. And I think that they're going to continue to play hard for their new coach as well. I think it's difficult to want to bet against Crosby just because of the pressure that he always puts on the opposing, tackles and quarterback as well. He finished with almost 15 sacks last year. I think he finished with 14 and a half, which was sixth in the league. And I just think that he's going to continue to have that high motor for that team and, definitely kind of lead that defense. Do I expect the Raiders defense to be, where do we kind of expect the Raiders defense to finish? I think is the question, when we're trying to assess whether we want to take Max Crosby or not.
Yeah.
And I do kind of feel like they, overperformed just a tad bit towards the end of the season. We know that they had, started the season off a little rocky, but then, after making the coaching change, they were smoking cigars after every game in the locker room and, just playing a lot better on both sides of the football. But a lot of that started with Max Crosby in that defense that he led. So odds sitting at, 10-1, couldn't talk you off. I just don't want to pick a team that I think will have a little bit of regression here, even though I expect the Raiders defense to be pretty good. And then Myles Garrett, go ahead. I'll go back to Myles Garrett. Okay.
No, I was just mentioning about go ahead. Max Crosby is how he's also a guy that really jumped off for me as well, because last year, what you mentioned, right, them having Antonio Pierce and as an interim head coach at that point before they made him the full-time head coach, is that those guys, especially defensively, really wanted to play for him. And you take a look at Max Crosby over the last 2 seasons, Chris, 12 and a half sacks in 2022, played all 17 games, and then last year, 14 and a half. So he's gradually increased his sack numbers year over year since the 2020 season. His first year in 2019, he had 10, but then he went from 7, 8, 12 and a half, 14 and a half. So it's the case in point that we talked about earlier in the episode, that is this team defense, the Raiders, going to be one of the better ones in the league? No, they're probably more than likely, because of that secondary, going to be one of the well below average teams. And I think for me at that point, it's not maybe the greatest odds, but then I would probably look at Max Crosby as a guy to be a sack leader at 6-1. Or again, definitely shop around this. I'm looking at drafting odds right now, but I think that if he gets into the realm of, again, gradually increasing his sack numbers, that he could be in that conversation for sack leader at the end of the year for a guy like Max Crosby. I agreed about everything that you said about Aiden Hutchinson. I think he's only going to continue to get better for this Detroit Lions team. So I think him right around 16-1 over at FanDuel. I think those are great odds. And then I'll turn it right back over to you for Myles Garrett, who did win the award last year.
Yeah, I mean, this dude is a monster. If I can, I'm not gonna lie to you. He's my favorite to win it again. Like it's just difficult to bet against Myles Garrett, man. This dude is absolutely, the season that he had last year. And then we also, what else do we take into consideration? We take into consideration being the best, player on your defense, and we do expect that. We also think about where your defense is going to land overall, and I do expect that, this defense to continue to be really, really good. This was a defense that we saw last year, well, at least it's a caveat, because when they were on the road, they were one of the worst defenses, but when they were at home, they were really, really good. And I do expect them to be good. They were number 1 in passing first downs allowed, number 2 in yards per pass attempt. And a lot of that was because of that interior, the interior of that line and just the defensive line in general. This was a team that, just really got you off of your spot and made you feel uncomfortable throughout the entirety of the game if you were the opposing quarterback. So I love Myles Garrett. If he's a strong guy, I mean, if you ever seen him play football, he just moves people out the way, kind of like, he's running through, like Pee Wee football. Everybody just looks so small and weak when it comes to, watching this guy play football. So I do like Myles Garrett. I like Myles Garrett a lot. If I think once you become a household name, this is the last thing I'll mention about Myles. Once you become that household name, and we know what he was able to do, not just last year, but year before, even going back to his days in college. Once you become that household name, you start to stick out a little bit. So if you continue to work just as hard as you did, then you can, continue to reap the benefits of, already taking home some of those awards. And we also mentioned that some of these guys that's won the award over the last, 5-10 years have won it multiple times. So we're talking about chalk, and I like that for Myles Garrett. So I'm not going to talk you away or steer you away at all, from Mr. Garrett himself at 8-1 here.
Yeah, I mean, you look at the pure sack numbers that he puts up, but it's more than just getting sacks, right? When we talk about this award, like you mentioned, he's just a man that's just gonna move mountains, for lack of better words. And you take a look over his last 4 seasons, at least 12 sacks the last 3 seasons, 16 sacks, 14 sacks, and was the best player on the best defensive team last year. And I was just kind of quickly querying. We talked about how we say defenses travel, but the Browns were not a case of that last year. They were perfect 9-0 towards the over in their road games last year. At home, I think it was like 2-6-1 or 2.
I vividly remember scratching my head multiple times. No way this is going to continue to happen. But yeah, that's what we saw last year.
It was just absolutely wild just to see that last year. I think that's one of the craziest things that we've seen in a very long time. But yeah, I mean, it's also the fact that I don't think there's a voter fatigue for this type of award, right? Because like you mentioned, like we've seen multiple guys win this award going back to the Aaron Donalds, my guy, JJ Watt, winning it, 3 times in 4 years. Same thing with Aaron Donald. And maybe Myles Garrett is on that same trajectory here because, again, like for everything that you mentioned there, Chris, that he's one of those guys that can definitely win this award multiple times throughout his career. So, and he's been relatively healthy as well, right? I know early in his career, there was games that he did miss, but over the last 3 seasons, he's played 17 games and then 16 games each respectively over the last 2 seasons. Before we get to the top 3 guys on the list here for this award for the Defensive Player of the Year, let me tell everyone about our friends over at Rhythm. Hey, look, if you're betting on player props and things like that, that's why you're listening to the Propcast, of course. And if you're also not checking out their AI picks and props from Rhythm, then you guys are missing out. They just predicted a bunch of winners for the 3M Open last weekend for the golf tournament, and their football models are about to drop. You can even customize your own betting models easily using Rhythm's tools. So claim your 7-day free trial today by going to sportsgamblingpodcast.com/rhythm. That's sportsgamblingpodcast.com/RITHMM. And Circa Survivor and Circa Millions. Hey, look, the greatest contests in the world are officially back at Circa. Circa Survivor and Circa Millions giving away $16 million in guaranteed prizes. Imagine the regret you'll feel if you win your office Survivor pool but didn't enter the Circa Survivor. And if you don't have a trip booked for Las Vegas yet before football, Ultimate Contest Weekend is a great time to go and hang out with Ryan and Sean and enjoy some of the open bar events at the greatest sports book in the world, August 22nd through August 24th. Use promo code SGP15 to save 15% off your hotel room for sign-up weekend. Sign up in person at Circa Sports between now and September 7th and use a proxy to play from anywhere. We even have a deal with footballcontestproxy.com to save you $50 off with promo code SGP. All right, Chris. So the top 3 guys on this list, and I think deservingly so. Nick Bosa 7-1. Also, same thing as Max Crosby. Again, definitely shop around for the best number, like we always say. Mr. Parsons down there with the Dallas Cowboys. He's at plus 550, and also TJ Watt over on DraftKings right now at plus 550. The best odds you can get on these guys. Micah Parsons plus 550 is the best number at BetMGM and DraftKings. And then TJ Watt, you could get a plus 750 over on Bet365. And then Nick Bosa, you could get a plus 850 over at BetMGM here. So again, Chris, like the 3 guys that we just talked about, you can make a case for any of these 3 guys. TJ Watt, like his brother, has been an absolute menace throughout his career. I think the one thing about TJ Watt, more so in the past couple of years, Chris, has been that is he going to be able to stay healthy? And he's going to be able to play the number of games that I don't want to say are required for this award, but I mean, last season, or I should say over the last 4 seasons, 15 games. You only played in 10 games in 2022, and last year was the first time since 2019 where he played all of the games in 17 games last year. I know he changed it back about, what was it, 2021 or 2020 when they moved the 17 game schedule. But look, we know he's a monster. He's going to rack up the sacks. He's going to force those fumbles. He's even going to get you a couple interceptions. So again, if you wanted to get on TJ Watt, and the Steelers are going to be a team that maybe offensively are not going to be very good because they're still, trying to figure out who their quarterback is going to be, whether it's Russell Wilson or whether it's going to be Justin Fields. I know Russell Wilson is still dealing with the injury right now, but this Steelers team, the history of this team has been always something that they've prided themselves on the defensive side. And having a guy like TJ Watt obviously is only going to make them, that much better. So I couldn't talk you up with TJ Watt. Nick Bosa, again, a guy gives me concerns about injury as well, right? For the San Francisco 49ers. And they've always been a team that, again, has prided themselves on the defensive side as well. But Nick Bosa has been able to stay relatively healthy throughout his career as well. Since 2021, 17 games, 16 games in 2022. And he played all 17 games last year. Only had 10.5 sacks last year for this team, for the 49ers. But I would shy away a little bit from Nick Bosa here, Chris. And then Micah Parsons. When you talk about this Dallas team, Chris, we've a lot of times see them being in shootouts. And it's something similar to the Cleveland Browns, where we talked about that their defense didn't really travel on the road last year. But I know Parsons is another guy that can put up the numbers in individual stats. But is Dallas going to be one of the best defenses in the league? I'm not sure about that. But so of these three guys, I think it's a chalk for me, honestly, at TJ Watt.
Yeah, so I'll go through them quickly here, I'll start with Bosa. Bosa got his money. This is one of the highest paid defenders in the NFL. I think 5 years, $170 million deal done. That was right before the 2023 season, which gives them an average salary of about $34 million a year. Was the highest, I think the highest paid defensive player. That just kind of makes me kind of shy away from him. But I will say this: I don't want to bet against Bosa, just because he's coming off somewhat of a down year. I mean, if you go back and look at his two previous years in 2021 and 2022, where he had 15.5 sacks and forced 4 fumbles, and he had 18.5 sacks and forced 2 fumbles. Last year, he was down to just 10.5 sacks and only 2 fumbles, with only one of those being recovered. And he played 17 games last year. So I do think that there's, some, maybe some, I wouldn't say narrative, but for him personally, just looking at his performance, probably wanting to get back to that level. I was reading through some stuff from, I think it was Sports Illustrated, talking about how Myles Garrett, I think, was giving TJ Watt giving TJ Watt some praise, not Nick Bosa. But I think just these guys kind of, what Myles Garrett said was he was just kind of, there's a list of guys that he studies in the offseason, and he was giving TJ Watt some praise, which we'll talk about him in just a second. But Nick Bosa is a guy that kind of conflicting for me, because I know how good San Francisco's defense is. I know that this is going to be another year where they, we can probably hang our hats on them being another great defensive team. And with him coming off of that season, although he is so highly paid, I don't want to bet against him. I do think he's the best player on that defense. He's going to put a lot of pressure on the opposing quarterback, as he always does, forcing the quarterback into, making quick decisions. And for that reason, if he can get there, if he can get home, I do think that he's live to win the award. I could definitely see him getting back there again. So that's Nick Bosa. What I'll say about TJ Watt, and you kind of mentioned him, if the health always kind of comes into play. I mean, we know how great TJ Watt is. This dude was great before his brother left. Your Houston Texans played all 17 games last season, which was great. NFL high, 19 sacks. He forced four forced fumbles and had 3 fumbles recovered. He could have actually won the award last year. Like, he could have easily went to TJ last year. Also threw an interception there as well. And I think the Steelers are going to continue to need him to play big here. Their defense, I think, as you mentioned, I projected to be on the field a lot because I don't believe in their offense quite yet. Bringing in 2 new quarterbacks and trying to get that thing figured out with Pickett not being there. So I couldn't bet against TJ Watt. If I think that he could be live to win the award again. And then last but not least, Micah Parsons, which I don't know. Micah Parsons is good. And what I will say, I guess one of the pros, if you do like Micah Parsons, who's the odds on favorite, like you mentioned, plus 550 on DK and BetMGM, is that he did play all last season. He had a career high 14 sacks, 64 tackles, and that's something that only 8 other players did as far as the 14 sacks. So he was top 8 in sacks. The thing I really love about Micah Parsons is he's still playing on that rookie. This is his rookie contract deal still. They have him here under contract through, I think it's the end of next season. In Dallas, I think they will rely heavily on his playmaking ability on the defensive side of the basketball. The Dallas Cowboys are a team that drafts really, really well, and they like to develop their talent, as you see with Micah Parsons. So I think that they exercise the option on him to stay and keep him for this year. And I think that he continues to have a big game to a big season because he's kind of betting on himself here. If I love getting these guys, I don't like taking the favorites, of course, but I do like betting on guys that are betting on themselves. So Micah Parsons being one of those guys that's going to be, he's going to garner a lot of attention in free agency if the Cowboys don't, bring him back and pay him what he feels like he should be paid based on, his success. Super young guy as well. So yeah, I don't want to take the favorite, but there are some things that make me like Micah Parsons here.
Yeah, I think this was one of the awards that we, talked about. I think maybe that's just it's the chalk heavy one, right? That the guys at the top, I think rightfully so. I mean, all these guys that you name, I mean, there's just an incredible talent and obviously the best defensive players in the entire NFL. And I think that we keep on preaching about this, but this is an award that doesn't have voter fatigue. And if a guy goes out and just has a great year again, the voters are not going to be afraid to give that award to that same player again, like a Myles Garrett, or whether it is again TJ Watt, for the Pittsburgh Steelers. So yeah, so I mean, look, that's pretty much it. Unfortunately, well, not I don't say unfortunately, but I mean that it's just what it is that this award is really a guy that's really at the top of the list here. So Chris, let's wrap it up here with maybe 2 or 3 guys that we will definitely be putting our coin down on for this award for this upcoming year. Who are your guys that you're definitely going to be on for this award?
All right, so we'll go. I'll probably take a unit and a half, and just split it up. I'm not gonna go too super crazy, but these odds are they're not too bad here. So we'll go Aiden Hutchinson. I like that 16-1. A super young guy, still early part of his NFL career. Like I mentioned, I think the Lions are going to be a really great defense. I think he's going to be the best defensive player for this team yet again. And we're also banking on a guy that, just hasn't been hurt so far. So we have all of those things in our corner here. So I do like Aiden Hutchinson. I'll take him. I'll also go Myles Garrett. I'll take the guy that won it last year at 8-1 as well. Just because I've seen him I'll just mention what you said. I've seen him move mountains and get to where he wants to on the football field, just putting a lot of pressure on opposing quarterbacks, as all of these guys do. But I think Myles Garrett could definitely win it again this year. So Aiden Hutchinson, Myles Garrett, and then I'll go TJ Watt. I think I like him a little bit more than Micah Parsons, just because Micah Parsons is the favorite. But TJ Watt, man, we mentioned it. Almost 20 sacks last season, 4 forced fumbles, 3 fumbles recovered. And like I said, I think the defense is going to be on the field a lot. So he'll have plenty of ample opportunities to make a bunch of plays for the Pittsburgh Steelers yet again here, And, there's something to, the Watts being on this defensive player of the year list here, the last 10 years, we got 4 names, although he's only been on here once. So yeah, we'll go TJ Watt as well. So TJ Watt, and then, like I said, Myles Garrett, and I'll go Aiden Hutchinson.
Yeah, I like the number on Aiden Hutchinson just from just the number perspective, right? Like what you can get at 16-1 for him currently over on FanDuel. I think that's an absurd number for him. And I think obviously he's only going to continue to get better for that Detroit Lions defense. TJ Watt for me as well, plus 750, currently over on Bet365. I think that's a good number for him as well. And he's always in the conversation every single year for this award. And I think that this might be another year where I think possibly the Steelers defense may have to just be even better for them to win ball games this year, because they do have a very, very tough schedule, especially in the second half of the year, where they have, I think, I want to say most of their their division games are really lined up after that bye week for them for this upcoming season. I don't know why I keep getting suckered to Max Crosby, but 10-1 I think is a good number for him at FanDuel. I don't know, maybe it's something about the quarterbacks documentary on Netflix, but I this guy could get into the realm of 17, 18, 19 sacks, and he's just gotten better every single year for this Raiders defense. And I think that this defense is going to be better. It's going to have to be on that front line generating pressure. I think that's going to have to be led by Max Crosby. So at 10-1, because it is 10-1 currently over on FanDuel, I think that's a really good number for him as well. So TJ Watt plus 750, Crosby, and then Aiden Hutchinson right there with you at 16-1 for this award for the upcoming season. All right, that is gonna wrap it up for this edition of the Propcast. We went through MVP, Offensive Player of the Year, Defensive Player of the Year, Coach of the Year, Comeback Player of the Year. So again, if you're not already subscribed to the Propcast feed, make sure you do so. Go back and listen to all those episodes, and hopefully we'll be at the end of the season, right around the Super Bowl. We'll be talking about some of the winners that we did give out for our season preview for the awards market. Maybe later this week, before we do get into the division previews, we come back and maybe kind of rapid fire through like some of the stat leaders, because there's a market there for this as well, right? Passing yards leader, rushing yards leader, touchdowns, and things like that. So maybe later this week, we'll do another episode for that before we do get into our division previews for our season-long player props, as we usually do every single season. But Chris, anything else you want to mention, my man, before we get out of here?
No, that's it, man. Like you said, I think I always want to mention that, all the other pods that we've done. So a lot of people, getting into this, sports bet space or NFL space and just looking for content. Definitely check out the other episodes. I think you'll find those helpful for your handicapping process. And, whether you agree or disagree with, with myself and, the content is there for you guys. So definitely check out the other pods and be on the lookout for the other ones that come as well. And happy betting to everybody. And we'll see you guys soon.
Yeah, 100%. Again, football season right around the corner. So we're wrapping up for it here on the Propcast. So again, a great time to remind you guys that if you aren't already subscribed to the podcast feed, or wherever you do get your pods, whether it's Apple, Spotify, Google, wherever the case might be, make sure you guys subscribe there. And also on YouTube, we have our own channel there as well, the Propcast. So we'll be going live there every time we do our props, whether it is for division previews and also for the regular season when we do our weekly props in the primetime Monday night, Thursday night games as well. So a good time to tap in with us right now and get yourself subscribed to the Propcast. Make sure you guys follow my guy Chris over on Twitter. That's at ChrisBeCappinn with 2 P's and 2 N's. You can follow me there as well at SportsNerd824. Maybe we'll be back later this week. That's why it's important to make sure to subscribe, like I mentioned. Till then, good luck with your bets. And always remember, let it ride.